You are listening to One Nation Under Crime, a historical, chronological true crime podcast. Each week, we go through our nation's history and discuss cases from each year, starting in 1800. I'm Kayla.
And I'm Leah.
We've made it through Thanksgiving, guys. We did it.
We survived.
Some of us barely, some of us well. Some of us, some of us
are rolling now.
Yeah, some of us, we've had more than our fair share of food.
No judgment.
None whatsoever. It was a good time. I made these. Oh, I did forget to tell you. I made these really good cranberry, kind of like dessert things. They're like almost like a cranberry blondie. Actually, if you go to Starbucks and you get their cranberry bliss bar, I made those essentially.
Oh, and so you'll have some waiting for me the next time I come to see you.
Delicious. Maybe we'll see. Possibly. There's a chance, but I'm not saying yes.
Okay. I'll take that.
But yeah, it was a good time. I know we talked about it last week. So out of all the things that you had, what was your favorite thing that you ate? Like, what was the best thing you had?
Okay. Well, the funniest thing, there was a very hilarious 6-year-old at one of my gatherings, and someone had made like cake pops with crushed up Oreos, and then like put them in, rolled them with chocolate, and then used candy corn to make like feathers and put little eyeballs on it. And so it looked like little turkeys. Cute. And so it was about time for dessert. And this sweet little 6-year-old says, "Who wants turkey balls?"
Well,
we all died laughing.
Was the child wrong? No, he was not. The child was not wrong in any of this. I'm just saying.
That was not what the maker of the dessert originally called them, but that is what they are now known as.
I'm liking the improvement.
Always.
Yeah, I'm liking the improvement on the name.
Every year we shall request turkey balls for dessert. Can I please have some turkey balls?
I'm all right with it.
We have sweaty balls for appetizers and turkey balls for dessert.
That is the best.
Yes. But my favorite thing to eat, I have to say, something that I made actually. I love, Rachel Hollis has a cookbook called Upscale Down Home, and her recipe for patty potatoes is in there. And it's like it's a hash brown casserole, but it's not just a hash brown casserole.
Oh yeah. I know what you mean. I made mine that I made. It's not technically a hash brown casserole. It's actually, the recipe is actually called like funeral potatoes. But they're delicious. But yeah, I agree. That was one of the, similarly to mine, we had so much left over. I'm probably, actually, when we're done, I'm probably going to have some.
You put potatoes and cheese and bacon and scallions together. I mean, it's always a good time.
It is.
Always a good time. What cannot be helped with bacon and cheese?
It was so good. So that I would probably say similar for me. It was, Thanksgiving food is always just so good. But we will hop into our episode for this week now that we are officially into, we're officially into Christmas season. So good times. Our sources for this week, the ever formidable Murder by Gaslight. Yep. And then the other is actually the, we've talked about it before, where it's like almost like a trial transcript, but it's like a pamphlet that they actually used to like sell after the trials. And it's typically called like The Life and Confession of, or something like that. Well, this one's called The Complete History of the Double Murder of Miss Garber and Miss Ream.
There you go.
So that gives you a little bit of
it rolls off the tongue.
That's only like the first part of the name of it. It was actually really long. So I cut off a pretty good bit of it. But So our births in 1858, January 6th, we have Albert Henry Munsell. He was a painter and teacher of art and inventor of the Munsell color system, which is it's like a color, I guess, I don't know what you would call it. It's not just a color system, but like a color theory that specifies colors based on 3 properties of color: the hue, which is the basic color; the chroma, which is the intensity of the color; and the value, which is like the light or darkness of the colors. He created that. He was a Capricorn. And next, on January 11th, we have Harry Gordon Selfridge Sr. He was an American retail magnate who founded the London-based department store Selfridges. His 20-year, what?
I'm sorry. There was I think it was a PBS masterpiece done about him.
Yeah,
it was so good. I loved it.
His 20-year leadership of Selfridges led to his becoming one of the most respected and wealthy retail magnates in the UK, and he was known as the Earl of Oxford Street.
Yes, and he is one of the people who is said to have coined the phrase "the customer is always right,"
which we know is not true. But yes,
but I'm just saying he is one of the people who is said to have coined that phrase.
Yes, he's also a Capricorn. Let's see. February 15th, John Joseph Montgomery was an American inventor, physicist, engineer, and professor at Santa Clara University in Santa Clara, California, who is best known for his invention of controlled heavier than air flying machines. He was an Aquarius.
That's intriguing.
So we are starting the world of flying machines, which is exciting. February 19th, I think I said John Joseph Montgomery was an Aquarius, but February 19th, Charles Alexander Eastman was born. He was a Native American author, physician, reformer, and co-founder of the Boy Scouts of America. He's an Aquarius. We were actually just talking about the Scouts. I have a little Scout myself. She's Girl Scout, but
there are a couple Eagle Scouts that are near and dear to my heart.
Yes. You have Eagle Scouts in your realm as well. So fun little time. He was I think I said he was an Aquarius. March 12th, Adolph Simon, I believe it's Ox, but it's OCHS.
Oh, you got when you say it.
That's what I think, possibly. He is an American newspaper publisher and former owner of the New York Times, big deal, and the Chattanooga Times, which is now called the Chattanooga Times Free Press. He was a Pisces. March 30th, we have William DeWolf Hopper. He is an American actor, singer, comedian, and theatrical producer, best known for performing the popular baseball poem Casey at the Bat. He was an Aries. June 17th, Mary Frances Hoyt. She was the first woman to receive a position in the United States Federal Civil Service. She was a Gemini. October 15th, John Lawrence Sullivan, simply known as John L., among his admirers, was dubbed the Boston Strong Boy by the press. He was an American boxer, recognized as the first heavyweight champion of gloved boxing. He is also generally recognized as the last heavyweight champion of bare knuckle boxing under the London prize ring rules.
I believe we've discussed neither one of us are really fans of boxing.
No, yeah, it's not not one that I prefer per se. And then you might know this name maybe because October 27th of 1858, a man by the name of Theodore Roosevelt was born.
I know that name.
Yep. He was the 26th president of the United States and the 25th vice president of the United States. He was a Scorpio. And on to our deaths in 1858. We talked about this person actually just a couple episodes ago. or actually, it might have just been, no, it was just in our last episode, September 17th. We talked about the Dred Scott decision. Well, Dred Scott actually died the year after his family was officially, I believe it's a year or two after his family was officially named like freed slaves. So that was of that year. And then December 18th, we have Thomas Hawley Chivers. He was an American doctor turned poet from the state of Georgia, and he is best known for his friendship with Edgar Allan Poe and his controversial defense of the poet after his death. So we are moving on to...
Before we move on.
No. What?
Please?
Yes.
I may have binged the Netflix series Wednesday.
I have not yet.
So many Poe references.
I'm sure. I'm waiting on it. I know it's going to be good. It just came out, so I haven't been able to watch it yet. But yeah, I'm pretty excited about it
because he is their most famous alumni, the school that she goes to.
Of course.
So you're gonna love it.
Oh, I know I'm going to.
Get ready. Okay,
I know it's going to be amazing.
It's great. Okay, proceed.
So we discussed this. I love a good acronym. And we are on to our ONUC SPY, or our Special Person of the Year for 1858. And it is, drumroll. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Catherine Drexel.
Ooh.
She was born on November 26th of 1858, making her a Sagittarius. She was born in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, not Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania. That's what I wrote. But she was born to Francis Anthony Drexel and Hannah Langstroth. Her birth name was actually Catherine with a C, Marie Drexel, and we'll go into the change of that a little bit later.
Oh, so she changed it to a K?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Her family was extremely wealthy, earning a fortune in the banking industry. Her uncle was Anthony Joseph Drexel, the founder of Drexel University in Philadelphia. She had two sisters, Louise and Elizabeth. And fun fact, she was also a distant cousin on her father's side to someone we all know as well, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis.
Oh, well.
Yes. She ended up taking...
Style icon.
Just an icon in and of herself. Catherine ended up taking religious vows and took the name Mother Catherine with a K.
Oh.
She not only dedicated herself, but also her entire inheritance to the needs of oppressed Native Americans and African Americans in the southern, western, and southwestern United States. She was a vocal advocate of racial tolerance. This led to Mother Catherine and 13 other women forming the religious congregation, the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament. She also financed more than 60 missions and schools around the U.S., as well as Xavier University of Louisiana, which is the only historically Black and Catholic universities in the United States.
I feel like we've spoken about her before.
Because she was just born.
Her community.
No? She would have just been born, so no, we wouldn't have.
Oh, I thought we may have alluded to, we will get to her in the future.
No, okay. There's somebody else that I think you're thinking of, and we will get to that person. But
okay.
So in 1988, Catherine was, I believe it's beatified or beatified by Pope John Paul II. This is actually what it's beatification is. It's BEAT. So that's why I say, I don't know if it's beatification.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Is the recognition accorded by the Catholic Church of a deceased person's entrance into heaven and capacity to intercede on behalf of individuals who pray in their name. And she was canonized into sainthood on October 1st of 2000. Canonization.
That's cool.
Yeah, for those who don't know, canonization is the declaration of a deceased person as an officially recognized saint, specifically the official act of a Christian communion declaring a person worthy of public veneration and entering their name into the canon of catalogs of saints or an authorized list of that communion's recognized saints. This makes Mother Catherine Drexel the second American-born saint.
That's awesome.
The first was Elizabeth Ann Seton, and she was born in New York City in 1774, but she was canonized in 1975. So the Vatican cited a fourfold legacy of Mother Catherine, and her fourfold legacy is a love of Holy Communion and perspective of the unity of all peoples, courage and initiative in addressing social inequality among minorities, her efforts to achieve quality education for all, and selfless service, including the donation of her inheritance for the victims of injustice. She is known as the patron saint of racial justice and philanthropist. Her feast day is celebrated on March 3rd of each year, which is actually the anniversary of her death. She actually died in 1955.
Wow.
At the age of 96.
Wow.
She was buried in Bensalem Township, Pennsylvania. This is the same place that the St. Catherine Drexel Mission Center and National Shrine is located. This mission center offers retreat programs, historic site tours, days of prayer, and presentations about St. Catherine Drexel, as well as lectures and seminars that are related to her legacy. It was originally known as St. Elizabeth's Convent, and it's listed on the National Register of Historic Places as of 1978. Her tomb was actually under the main altar, but in 2018, her remains were transferred to a new shrine at the Cathedral Basilica of St. Peter's and Paul in Philadelphia. So that is St. Catherine Drexel. She is the second saint that's American born.
She lived over into my father's lifetime.
Isn't that crazy?
I mean,
it's wow. Insane. I mean, like, it's crazy to think of that. And then too, for her she was
almost 100 years old, but
yeah, like, I mean, but still,
my dad, and my dad was like an infant, but
right.
No, he wasn't an infant. He was, yeah.
It's insane. Like it's crazy to think like
he was
now
little.
We're getting into that age of, and like we were just like Theodore Roosevelt's now born. Like that's kind of odd to think about in a way, just because it seems like those things are just not too, which they weren't, but like they weren't really that long ago. But yeah, I thought she was a pretty interesting one to pull out. Yes. And I mean, somebody who donates, I mean, her family is like, when we say wealthy, like that family was wealthy. Her uncle founded an entire university, and for her to just be like, you know what, I'm going to become, I'm going to be Mother Catherine from now on. And so that's why her name changed from a C to a K.
Yeah.
And she was like, and you know what, I'm taking my entire inheritance and I'm just putting it towards all of the social good in this world, which is just amazing. Yes. To me, I that's got to be I wouldn't imagine an easy decision, but I guess if it's what you're choosing in that sense, I guess it would almost at the same time be like one of the easiest decisions you'll make,
I don't know a whole lot about nuns and such because, I was raised Baptist. I was not raised Catholic. So, obviously there's a lack of education there.
I mean, we've all seen Sister Act.
Well, what I was going to say is I have watched a show called The Midwife. And it is set in it starts in the 50s in the slums in London. The area is called Poplar, or Poplar is how they say it, in London, and it's a midwifery in that area, and it's midwives who are trained midwives who are not nuns, and also some that are nuns. And so you kind of get into the characters. So I've kind of learned you get to know the characters, and I don't know how true to life it is, but I'd like to think that they have kept it as true as they can,
as they could, right?
Yeah. And you know, some of them talk about their life before and that sort of thing, and one of them, you know, was quite well off beforehand, and you know, didn't really talk about it much, and then you find out, you know, that she was, and you know, that people told her she was crazy to give it up, and she was like, this is my calling.
Yeah,
this is what I was meant to do.
It's an interesting kind of choice.
But I couldn't imagine.
Yeah, it's very interesting to make that choice. And then also to have, she wasn't the only child. So she had two sisters who also they also, you know, seemingly would have received an inheritance as well. So it was just a really interesting thing. And, you know, we didn't have a super long biography on her as we do for some people. But just, I mean, that's a crazy thing to... We have
not something you hear every day.
Yeah, like so I thought that was really cool. So
that is cool.
Just before we go into our case for this week, we're about to go into it, but just want to give a slight trigger warning. I wouldn't say breezed over or glossed over the severity of one portion of our case for this week, but I will just kind of give a little bit of a trigger warning because there are some aspects of this case that involve sexual assault. And so I know that can be triggering for some people as a discussion as a whole. I don't discuss it in grave detail. I don't, I won't even really allude to it very much. But just to be aware, that is a part of the case for this week. So I just, you know, always like to throw those things in there just to be on the safe side. So on to our case, January 21st of 1858, Alexander Anderson and Henry Richards stood trial for the sexual assaults and murders of Anna Garber and Elizabeth Ream in Manheim, Pennsylvania. So this is actually a Pennsylvania themed week, apparently. So we're going to hop over to Manheim, and this is actually, as you can tell by the title of this episode, this is titled The Manheim Tragedy. So anywhere that you look for it, it's going to be referred to as the Manheim Tragedy in this sense. So Manheim is a small borough located in Lancaster. We talked about that actually just a couple episodes ago as well. Telling you, we're all about Philadelphia. There was that one. We were in Boston for a while. We've been in New York for a while. Now, apparently, Pennsylvania is where we're at. So it is located in Lancaster County in the southeast portion of Pennsylvania. The population in 2020 was just over 5,000. So we talked about this before, but essentially the size of the town that Leah lives in. So it's not
Mayberry.
It's not a very large town. It was originally laid out by Henry William Stiegel, and I believe it's Stiegel or Stiegel.
There you go.
In 1762, and then later incorporated in 1838. Manheim was a safe haven during the Revolutionary War for the families of colonial patriots Robert Morris, the great financier Dr. Joseph Shippen, Surgeon General of the Continental Army, and General Richard Bach, and the Colonial Postmaster General and husband of Benjamin Franklin's daughter. So this...
Dude, I thought you were just going to stop at Benjamin Franklin. I was like, wait a minute, that was not a historical tidbit that I knew.
Hey, you never know.
Rewriting history over how.
Benjamin Franklin's daughter lived there with her husband as well, who was the Colonial Postmaster General.
There you go.
So Stiegel was originally going to build himself an industrial empire named the Manheim Glass Works, but he failed financially and had to sell the development in 1775. He tried his best to revive the business, but it actually officially closed in 1780, so just 5 years later. But Stiegel Glass Works opened in Manheim in 1976. It was named for Henry William Stiegel. By the time of our case today, the railroad hadn't quite made its way through the city yet. It's actually just a couple years after this. So January 1st of 1862, the first railroad train came to Manheim with the completion of the first division of the Columbia and Reading Railroad. That's always so hard to say. Then another industrial marvel came to Manheim in 1884 when water pipes started being laid for the town and the Manheim Electric Company began service. Now, the Manheim community hosts a farm show the first week of every October. Kreider Farms, a dairy and egg producer located within and around Manheim, offers tours where visitors can watch approximately 1,700 dairy cows.
Oh.
Manheim is also home to Spooky Nook Sports, which is the largest indoor sports complex in the country that is complete with rock climbing, an arcade, and summer camps. This place is huge and it has a hotel attached to it. I was very interested. I was like, what is this place? I looked it up. This place is massive. Like, you've been to Disney World now, and so you've seen the ESPN like World of Sports where they have it's on Disney property, but the World of Sports is where they usually have all the cheerleading competitions and all of that kind of stuff. So the Spooky Nook Sports is the largest indoor sports complex in the country. So it's bigger than that. So it's bigger than that. According to discoverlancaster.com, Manheim is an expansive town bustling with art galleries, charming boutiques, nationally known attractions, bountiful restaurants, vibrant countryside, and distinctive lodging options. Distinctive lodging options. It looks like a cute little town. It kind of does remind me of the town that you live in. As I was kind of going through some photos, it looks kind of like the town that you live in, but like, I'm not saying this in like a negative way, but like a like really upscale. Yours is more like in the country. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was going to say, ours does not have any sort of sports complex like that.
This is. They have like really, really, like really good, like high-end restaurants and that kind of thing. So like, it's very cute in the sense of like, like a little main street and everything, but everything there is really kind of like expensive and like high end.
They have a, what am I trying to say? They have the businesses and stuff. They have all of that going for them. My town does not.
Yeah, like they have a lot of economy like going through that. They've got a pretty good like layout there.
What am I trying to say? You know what I mean. You know, my brain won't brain.
It's okay. They have a lot of I guess just a lot of commerce like in that area.
There you go.
Or it's from everything that I've seen, it looks like a pretty cute little town. Like for sure there's probably a Hallmark movie filmed there at some point.
Look, my little hometown, my little main street could be a Hallmark.
It really could. And I'm kind of surprised that it hasn't been yet. But which funny you say that, because we were so today me and my boyfriend were in an area that had signs, and I was like, oh hey, that sign right there, it's kind of funny. I was like, that kind of indicates that there's like a movie filming nearby. And so I was showing it to him and I was like, oh yeah, that's what that means. So like FYI, if you ever see like a sign kind of near where you live that it'll say like working trucks or crew trucks or something, and then there will typically be a sign under it that has like some weird name or something on it. Like this one said Caesar. It said working trucks was one sign, and the sign below it said Caesar. And it was a neighborhood that was like really nice, like a beautiful high-end neighborhood. And I told him, I was like, yeah, those signs right there like pretty much indicate that they're filming a movie there, because they when they're filming like pretty big movies, they don't use the movie name to direct people ever. The movies all go under like a alias. So it wouldn't surprise me if this little town has seen its fair share of that as well. We'll see it kind of around Birmingham. We see them a lot of times too. There'll be, I've seen them several different places where it'll say like this way crew trucks, and then it'll have like a little name for like a weird named movie. And they do that so that you don't know what's filming.
Right.
Because, it could be like a huge movie. I know that the Marvel movies had really weird code names. I know the most recent just Captain America movie was called like Sunday in the Park with George was its like alias. So they do it something totally random, like where you don't know what it is.
Well, because they don't want people crashing the set.
Yeah.
Thing.
And so anyways, but yeah, this it wouldn't surprise me if Manheim had itself a nice little Hallmark movie, which are on right now. So if y'all would like to, we were watching some the other day and I would sarcastically look over at my boyfriend every so often and I would go, do you want to know how it ends? And he's like,
the dog does not die.
Well, he would go, you want to know how it ends? And I'm like, I'd say that. And he would go, I guess. And I'd go, they end up together. And he's like, okay. And then like the next one would come on and I'd go, do you want to know how it ends? And he's like, sure. And I'd go, they end up together. So I love it. You know, fun times. So on to our case for this week. Anna Garber lived in a farmhouse in Manheim Township with her husband, Conrad, and their 10 children. That is 2 full hands for those who have all of their digits. Too many, way too many. You don't even have to ask. At this time, Manheim was described as, quote, one of the most beautiful and fertile sections of the country.
Apparently so. Apparently. She had 10 kids.
Yeah. Apparently, fertile is a great adjective for that.
I don't bump.
Yes. But on December 15th of 1857, the safe haven of their home was destroyed. Conrad had gone off to work for the day and Anna was in the kitchen making butter. Such a I don't know what the word homemaker thing to do, make butter. Elizabeth Ream came by and she was keeping Anna company as she was working on chores for the day. The two were not only neighbors but also in-laws because Anna's daughter, Marianne, married Elizabeth's son. So they were in-laws together. Around 1 p.m., Marianne stopped by her mother's house to visit for a while, but when she stepped in the door, she immediately knew something was wrong. The furniture was toppled over, there was blood on the floor, and no one was answering when she called out to them. The horror continued when Marianne reached the back room of the home. She opened the door for her mother. She opened the door to find her mother, Anna Garber, and her mother-in-law, Elizabeth Ream, dead. Just a bit of a trigger. Like here is where I'm going to kind of say quickly what happened. Both women had their throats cut from ear to ear, and there was severe trauma to both of their heads. The positions of their bodies were described as in a, quote, indelicate position. So you can use your imagination to what that might mean as to what the trigger is for this episode. Marianne ran screaming from the home and went to find help. Later, when inventory had been taken of the items of the home, it was found that there were some missing items and money, but there was also a pair of shoes in the home that hadn't been there before, and they didn't belong to anyone in the house.
That's odd.
It's very odd, and we'll get to what occurred there. So, right, I put here, right, wrong, or indifferent, but kind of this is a bit of a controversial part of the story that we're going to discuss. But 2 Black men who had worked in the neighborhood that morning were the first suspects. So I will say this. It's not specifically because of that. I'm not saying that isn't a contributing factor. I'm not saying their race is not a contributing factor to why they could have been looked at.
They were strangers in town.
They did not, right. They were not members of that community in general. So they were people that had come in from out of town that people there already didn't really know. So, you know, 1, you're an outsider. That doesn't help. 2, you're of a different, you know, race than the other people that are, you know, primarily in this area. So that's another thing as well. So there are some issues here. I will say this isn't really a spoiler to anything, but they did the murders. So this is not a case of the wrong people being accused of the murder. So we'll get into that in a bit. So sources do say African American, and one man is described as a word that we've established is a racial slur. that starts with an M. I don't prefer because I don't know. Gotcha. I know it is a racial slur. That means someone who is mixed African and European. And this word is used actually like quite a lot in a lot of different regions at this time, but I'm not going to go in that direction. And one of these men actually also spoke German. So while they do say African American, I'm just saying it's two Black men just because I don't know that for sure. And I hate to make that as just a blanket assumption. So Isaac Kaufman actually lived directly across from the Garber's farmhouse and recalled that at around 11 a.m. on the morning of the murders, two men had come to his house asking if they could clean his chimneys for some money. Isaac told them that he didn't have any work for them at the moment, and when the men asked for food, Isaac gave them a loaf of bread and the men left. Isaac noticed the men went in the direction of the Garber house, and he assumes that they found work there because he saw them go into the home, but they didn't leave immediately. So he was like, okay, they walked into the house, so clearly like Miss Garber has some work for them to do. And then just kind of went on about his day. Like he didn't really pay much attention to it after that. That was just what he saw. When word got out that the men were wanted, it didn't take long for them to be found. They were headed towards Lancaster on Littiz Pike. It's Litiz. When they were arrested and taken to the mayor's office. And they were taken to the mayor's office, which I thought was interesting because they had to identify themselves. And so, because people like they weren't from this area, so they took them to the mayor's office, I guess, for them to do that. Once they were there, they identified themselves as Alexander Anderson and Henry Richards. Anderson had $90 in gold and silver tied in a silk handkerchief, and Richards had $3 wrapped in German newspaper. Richards was also wearing Anna Garber's boots.
Oh, his mistake.
It was his shoes that were left in the house. So that's how we know the shoes. The handkerchief Anderson had in his possession was also a perfect match to one that Conrad Garber often wore. Shock rippled through the county, and the men were described as, quote, this is a censored quote, and I don't know what phrase it is missing. I know where the phrase is missing, but I don't know exactly what it is that they took out. We can't imagine it was pretty bad based on what we know the trigger of this episode is. So when we get to that part, I'll just say and blank because it truly is a blank in the sentence and I don't know what fits in there. So I can't even give context to what that might be. I can just say that my assumption based on what I gave the trigger as, it's probably something alluding to that.
Interesting.
Quote, their double murder was the work of a triple motive. They demanded blood, gold, and blank. The heart sickens, thought recoils within the dungeon of the mind. Imagination palls. The pen involuntarily stops at the contemplation of such a compound deed of fiendish brutality. While it was enacting, angels wept and averted their earth-reaching eyes. Unused to look down upon such human depravity, and devils trembled at the contemplation of the consequences of their own hellish, incompetent instigations. So, like I said, I don't know what that blank is, but I get, based on what we're discussing. Yeah, I don't know that for a fact. There were lynch mobs in the street calling for justice. And when the men needed to change jails, the authorities were concerned that they wouldn't be able to hold off the crowd. The funerals,
understandably.
Yeah, exactly. The funerals for the women were held just 2 days after the murders. 3 different ministers carried out the sermons. One was German Baptist, one was German Reformed, and one was Lutheran. And I believe the Reformed is Reformed Catholic. The collective thought of the ministers was that the funerals would kind of dampen the outrage surrounding the murders, but
go ahead and get it done and over with.
Yeah, it did the exact opposite. After the funerals, like right after, another mob grew outside of the jail, seeing if they could push down the walls of the jail to get in and obtain justice for themselves.
Whoa.
They were angry not only about the murders, but they were also concerned that the men would be set free due to some legal loophole or that the court would just let them get away with it altogether. They didn't know, and this was kind of really unprecedented in this town at the time. So they were kind of just really concerned of like, you know, the law's not going to do what it's supposed to do and, you know, et cetera.
They better pay.
Exactly. They thought that they would actually be saving the county money by, quote, taking care of the situation themselves by taking the men into the woods and burning them alive.
Oh, no.
That was the plan. Another 2 days passed and the preliminary.
Barbaric.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Another 2 days passed and the preliminary hearing was set for that day. By this point, the local authorities had been fighting off mobs from breaking into the jail for 4 days.
Golly.
And they knew it was likely too risky to try and move the men to the courthouse for the hearing. Instead, the preliminary trial was held in the storeroom of the jail. Yeah. The men were identified by witnesses and the evidence against them was brought forward. Alexander Anderson and Henry Richards were officially indicted for the murders of Anna Garber and Elizabeth Ream. The trial was immediately set for the third Monday of January. So we have discussed before, and I'll kind of bring it up here, like at the difference between indicted and convicted. Indicted in this sense essentially means that the state or, you know, the prosecutor has enough evidence to lean in the direction that this is, there's enough evidence here to go to trial. So it's,
yeah, we're moving forward with this.
Right. A lot of times this would be if there wasn't any evidence or, you know, if something else, that's kind of when they would say like, no, we need to let them go, kind of those kinds of things. But indicted does not mean you are guilty.
Yes.
Indicted means that you have been charged with an offense and those charges are then going to be brought to a trial or to forward to make a decision, whether that is a plea or something like that.
You've been charged. How do you plea?
Right. And so this has been just kind of like we have enough evidence to move forward. So that's kind of what's going on here. By the time the trial actually came, the interest in the case hadn't died down. In fact, the entire courthouse was full. Yes, the entire courthouse. There wasn't a seat available in the courtroom and the halls were packed. The sheriff had to come in and ask people to leave the courtroom so that the men who were on trial could get into the room.
Wow.
That's how many people there were. Like they had to say, you were literally sitting in the seat for the defense. You need to get up. Like that's how many people were there. It's insane.
Those poor chumps, they were like, we got a front row seat. And they're like, guess what?
No, you got to move. So people kept coming in, and in order to stop the crowds, the sheriff locked all of the doors to the courthouse.
Well, that's not a fire hazard.
Oh, right. He wouldn't let anyone in or out until court ended for the day. The cases were tried separately, with Alexander Anderson going first. It wasn't much of a trial to begin with because Anderson's attorney didn't have much of a defense other than it was circumstantial, and he hoped that he could get Anderson a sentence other than death. At this time, the death penalty had kind of itself been put on trial. And a lot of people were trying to get rid of the death penalty overall. So as we've discussed, like the death penalty has always been a debate of conversation. And at this time, a lot of people were, you know, opting for life in prison instead of the death penalty. So Anderson's attorney in this case was just trying to get any other sentence than death. Anderson actually pled not guilty, but after just a few minutes of deliberation, he was convicted of first-degree murder. Henry Richards was up the next day, and his went even quicker than Anderson's. Richards' attorney argued the same as Anderson's, but he also stated that Richards was, quote, weak of mind and easily led, and he participated in the murders. But he was like also just a bystander.
He was like, I was with my friend. He said, we got to do this. He's the money man. He's the idea guy. Mm-hmm. I'm just kind of with him. Yep. He told me to do it.
Yep. It shouldn't be much of a surprise that Henry Richards was also convicted of first-degree murder after just a few short minutes. Keep in mind, this was a very well-known case. This was not something that kind of like we talk about today, where juries are selected and they're like, do you know anything about this case? And, they kind of try and pick a jury that's kind of non-biased. That's not a thing here. So once the men were awaiting their sentences, the real story came out regarding the events of that day.
Uh-oh.
A few clergymen convinced Anderson to make a full confession in exchange for selling copies of the confession and giving the money to Anderson's wife and kids. So they were like, hey, if you do this, we'll take all this money. Now, it was never fully said that actually happened. I will say that, but that's how they convinced him to do it. Anderson agreed and said that he would do it, but he wanted to write it himself. The clergyman agreed and said that they would only edit it for spelling, etc. But it's speculated that they changed a bit more and that they exaggerated some of the points. So while this is the general story of what happened, there could have been
take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, taken. They especially had a field day when Anderson wrote that he began drinking alcohol at the age of 6 years old, and started stealing not long after. Anderson stated that on the day of the murders, he and Richards had planned on robbing a house that day, and they were only pretending to be chimney sweeps to see who was home at that time. Before they went out for the day, the two men got drunk and set off on a mission. When they arrived at the Garber farmhouse, they were initially turned away, but they went back to ask for some money from Anna in order to go and purchase more alcohol. Anna refused, and this is when the men went into the house to attack the women. The men pilfered through the home to see what they could take, and when they went to leave, they could hear the women still alive in the next room. So by this point, they had already attacked them. They had already hit them on the head to knock them out, and they thought that they had killed them by that point, but they could still hear them moving around in the room. This is when they went back and cut their throats to make sure they didn't leave any witnesses.
Wow.
Yeah. Henry Richards, on the other hand, was not going to confess to anything and laughed when it was suggested to him that he should do so. He maintained his innocence and claimed that Anderson did all of it. But the closer it came to the execution date, Richards confessed. On Friday, April 29th of 1858, Alexander Anderson and Henry Richards were hanged at Lancaster Jail. Over 2,000 people came to see the execution, but the sheriff only allowed the official witnesses to be there for the execution. So I found this was pretty interesting. At this time, they had
appreciate him.
Yeah, they had kind of, it's still not great. But they had kind of changed up the rules a bit to say, there's only certain official witnesses allowed to be here for this. And those official witnesses were the 24 jurors, because remember, there were 2 trials. So 24 jurors total, the sheriff, 2 deputies, 2 clergymen, and a state senator who actually attended all of the executions in the state at the time. But
it's not a public picnic affair when people are being executed.
It didn't stop people from trying to see the execution either way. One man, look, you see a business opportunity and you take it. He set up a scaffolding on a nearby hill and charged $1 a seat to view the execution.
Oh my goodness. I don't get it.
I know. At 11:45 a.m., both men were hanged by the neck and pronounced dead by noon that day. The men's bodies were taken down from the execution site and buried at the Lancaster poorhouse, which is typically like a potter's field. From that respect. So yeah, that is actually the Manheim tragedy. And like I said, I wanted to give that trigger in here. I don't discuss it a lot, but just to be on the safe side, because I tried to just allude to it instead of say it. And so but we also have discussed many times that like while there are some things we don't prefer to discuss in a case, we also think that not fully discussing their case is also kind of a disgrace to their memory, because it's, not
reality
fully,
is reality.
Yeah, it's not fully.
That's what happened to them.
Right.
Exactly.
And so that's the Manheim tragedy. And there's a lot to it.
So do we know where they were from?
No, it didn't say.
I mean, because, the one had the
they were
from
family. They were not from that town. We do know that for sure.
Yeah, that
right. But he did have a wife and family. Anderson was the one that I believe was referred to as a derogatory term of mixed descent.
Mm-hmm.
And then I do know that Henry Richards was the one that spoke German. So I don't know. I don't know if, that there's a lot there as far as that. And Henry Richards was also the one that had money wrapped up in a German newspaper in his pocket. Mm-hmm. So yeah, as far as like where exactly they were from, I couldn't see. They did have that entire pamphlet. It was extremely hard to read because it was an actual copy of the pamphlet.
Oh yeah.
So it wasn't really easy to read in that sense either. So which is frustrating. But that is everything that we do know about the case in general. And it was the Manheim tragedy. And it was quite the stir in the town, as you saw, like for 4 days straight. And it actually took, from everything that I read, it took quite a while for the crowd to kind of finally disperse from trying to like break into the jail to kind of, I don't know what they call it. Would it be like vigilante justice or something?
It sounds like it. I mean, I can just, I live out away from town in the country, in the South. There are some good old boys around here.
Yeah.
I mean, and for those of you that don't know what that means, a good old boy, they're the ones that are going to take the law into their own hands.
Mm-hmm.
But I tell you what, they just don't need to mess with me. I find me, they do something to my woman, I'm gonna
exactly.
They're gonna meet Jesus. They'll say something like that. Or they're the ones that This is very stereotypical, okay? Mm-hmm. This is not every man that lives in the South. I'm not trying to further stereotypes for people in the South, but there are some here, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But, the ones that had the big trucks with the stickers on them that, well, of course, that it's like the naked woman silhouette and the,
Yeah, they're definitely going to take the law into their own hands.
Those kind of
better. They're
exactly. Well, we ain't time to wait around for somebody to make a decision. I'm just gonna go ahead and take care of this myself. Let's just go ahead and jerk him out. We'll take him out to the woods.
I was just about to say I think they call it backwoods justice.
Absolutely,
is what it's called, and that's exactly what it is. That's the term I was looking for. Is backwoods. It's like backwoods justice, where
and that's what it sounds like.
Themselves.
That it's that small town.
We take care
country.
of our own.
Exactly. That's exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah, and there is
something to be said for community. It's going to take care of your community.
People together in terrible ways.
But I mean, you do have to let the law take care of,
right. And I mean, and we've seen a lot of things in doing this podcast, and then in just seeing other things in general, such as like the Adnan case, where thank goodness he's out and just had his first Thanksgiving in decades, which, like, I'm not gonna lie, got a little sentimental because he's had his first like Thanksgiving at home in decades, which is just I'm sure is an overwhelming feeling, but you know, we want the law to do what the law was intended to do,
right?
And we want the law to do it in the correct way. So I can understand from a perspective of a lot of us have seen, and even with this podcast, we've seen where the law does not get it right. And we do see where, you know, the law will swear up and down that they did get it right. But then years and years and years later, it comes out and they're like, oops, no, we didn't do this accurately or correctly.
Or someone will find a loophole.
Exactly.
In the law and will use a law, you know, in a way that it's not intended.
And I think that's
where the frustration comes.
Yeah, that's where the frustration kicks in. And so I can say that at this time in our history of the law and of the justice system, I can say that at this point, I do know a lot of people. I'm saying current times, not this point in 1858 that we're discussing. But I know, I know in current times, a lot of people are very jaded by the justice system and they don't trust the justice system. And I can't say you're wrong. Like I can't. There's a lot of times I believe that it doesn't always get it right, regardless of how good intentioned it is, or I think there's a lot of background to it for a lot of reasons. But I think at this time as well, you are morphing from a time of backwood justice being the norm to a time of we are supposed to let the law take things from here. And I think this is in 1858, this is a time where a lot of people were still adjusting to the idea of that, of, oh, well, before, you know, we would just take care of this themselves, or we were, you know, they were under the crown. So at that time they would go by what the crown decided and different things. And so I think that's probably a part of it too, is this is the way we've always done things. This is, you know, and
what do you mean we can't do that?
Yeah. What do you mean we can't just burn someone alive? What kind of country is this?
Or, you know, they're less than, they don't look like us. They're less than, they don't count. They don't matter.
They are outsiders.
And now that, you know, that's not what I think.
Exactly. I'm saying that's the mindset of a lot of people.
That would be the mindset.
Which is why I said, like, it's kind of a hard thing when it's immediate, because it's two white women and it's two black men. And I know that a lot of people could take a look at that and say, oh, this is a case of racial, you know, and yes, there is always a possibility. I will say, based on what everything that I read, that both men did confess, and while history can be changed and a lot of things can be rewritten to be, as a lot of people say, like whitewashed to what actually happened. Yes, there could be a lot more behind the story to say, you know, this is this and this and this is what happened. But I mean, seemingly in this case, the correct people did receive, I won't say the correct punishment. I will say
it looks like the justice system did its job.
They did, yes. I will say the correct people were suspected. I will not say that necessarily the punishment was accurate, but yeah, a lot of cases in this, and we've talked about it before. We both have interesting views on the death penalty, and we've talked about it before, where I think even when we started this podcast, yours was slightly different from what it is now, just because of how we've talked through different things and just what we've seen in general, and how many times we've seen these cases where it's like, oh, this, like, they got it wrong, like, and these people were sentenced to death and they got it wrong.
Well, I mean, I don't want anybody to die. I mean, you know, what's my line?
Yeah, murder is bad. By the way, true crime obsessed, looking over at you, one Patrick Hines. I was listening to an episode they did. They're doing 2 episodes a week now till the end of the year. They usually do that every year. And they cover documentaries and stuff like that. And I was getting ready yesterday, and I was listening to the most recent episode for this week. And all of a sudden I heard Patrick Hines go, guys, murder is bad. And I was like,
don't you steal my line.
Trademark. ONUC. Like, it's like I need to trademark that before
like,
somebody takes
start on
it.
your email. Like, excuse me, sir, I'm going to need you to listen to this podcast.
I know,
right here, and you need to see our merch.
I know, it was so funny, but I heard it and I was like, excuse me, how dare you?
Back it up, brother.
Yeah, don't even know our podcast, but still, you should.
You're going to learn today.
Yeah, you're going to have to. But yeah, so either way, that is our case for this week. We have a website where you can find any and all ONUC information you're looking for. It's onenationundercrime.com. We are One Nation Under Crime pretty much everywhere you want to look for us, and we are at ONUC Pod on Twitter. If you love our podcast as much as we do, please go follow us, subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts so you can make sure that you get our episodes as soon as they come out. And go leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, 5 stars only. We have discussed this before. If you have nothing,
and we'll send you a prize.
We will always send you a prize. So please do that. And let me know that you've done that. Send me a screenshot of it. We will send you a prize.
And who doesn't love prizes? Mail.
Always love a good
I love prizes.
Love it. So we also have a Patreon where you can join it. I lost all of my words there. We do have a Patreon if you would like to help.
What do we have?
Yeah, with it's a thing. If you would like to help with the cost of making and hosting the show, where I'm messing up is I'm actually reading what I wrote instead of doing it from memory like I usually do. And so I'm trying to, my mind is trying to just go on autopilot as I'm also trying to read.
I thought you got excited about prizes.
You know, I do love a good prize. So, yeah, that's what was going on with that. Clearly, I just need to trust myself in the future. We appreciate you guys for listening to this week's episode of One Nation Under Crime. We will see you here, same time,
different crime
next week. And remember, there isn't always liberty and justice for all, unless you do have cheesy potatoes at Thanksgiving.
Yes.
I think that's a win all the way around.
I will. Yes, that covers a multitude of faux pas.
Exactly. We will see you guys next week. Goodbye.
Bye.